The sun shone brightly on the tall glass building of Montgomery Enterprises, one of the richest companies in the city. Employees walked hurriedly, dressed in expensive suits, talking about deals, profits, and the latest gossip. Today, however, something unusual was about to happen. At the entrance, a black teenager appeared. She was not wearing a designer dress or expensive shoes. Her clothes were simple, a plain white shirt, black jeans, and worn sneakers. Her backpack swung lightly on her shoulder, and yet she walked with a confidence that made people stop and stare. "Who is she?" whispered a young employee, nudging his colleague. "Does she even belong here?" The teenager didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the tall doors of the company. She took a deep breath and pushed them open. The automatic doors slid silently, and a small murmur ran through the lobby. People paused mid-step, staring at the girl who looked so ordinary, yet somehow different. In the executive office, the CEO, Jonathan Montgomery, a millionaire in his late 40s, was sipping his coffee. He was a man who had seen many ambitious young people try and get a job, but today, something made him smirk. He turned and noticed a teenager walking through the lobby. "Who is this?" he asked aloud, laughing lightly. "She looks like she just walked out of school playground." The teenager reached the front desk and said calmly, "I'm here to see Mr. Montgomery. I'm the new heiress of this company." The receptionist almost dropped the phone. "Excuse me, did you say heiress?" "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady and clear. "I am the new heiress. Please let Mr. Montgomery know I have arrived." The receptionist's hands trembled as she dialed the CEO. Meanwhile, employees started whispering to each other. Some laughed quietly, thinking this must be a joke. Others stared, curious. Jonathan Montgomery finally stood, now fully amused. He leaned against his desk and called out, "Send her in. I want to see this little heiress." His tone was full of mockery, but inside, he felt a flicker of curiosity. Who was this girl who dared to claim such a title? The teenager walked into the office. Her eyes scanned the room, calm and unshaken. She noticed the expensive paintings, the gold-plated furniture, and the large glass windows that showed the city below. None of it impressed her. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, a sly smile on his face. "So, you are the new heiress. Tell me, do you even know how this company works?" he asked, his tone dripping with doubt. The teenager smiled faintly. "I may not know everything yet," she said, "but I know enough to make a difference." Jonathan laughed, loud and condescending. "Enough to make a difference? You're a teenager. You don't even understand business." The girl didn't flinch. She simply placed her backpack on the floor and stood straight. "Then maybe it's time someone showed you what real talent looks like," she said, her eyes locked on his. For the first time in years, Jonathan Montgomery felt a small twinge of uncertainty. Who was this teenager? How could she speak with such confidence? And why did she feel powerful, despite her young age and ordinary appearance? As she left the office after the brief meeting, employees couldn't stop talking. Some whispered in awe, some in disbelief, but everyone agreed on one thing. This girl was different. She had entered the company as a simple teenager, but somehow she had already made a mark. And so, the story of the black teenager who had challenged the richest man in the city had begun. The arrival was just a start, but already the stakes were high, the tension was building, and no one in the company would ever look at her the same way again. The next morning, the office buzzed with unusual excitement. Employees whispered in corners, stealing glances at the teenager who had arrived yesterday and dared to call herself the heiress. Some thought she was a joke. Some were curious. But one person was watching her more than anyone else. Jonathan Montgomery, the millionaire CEO. Jonathan sat in his high-backed leather chair, swirling his expensive coffee. He smirked, thinking, let's see if she's really as clever as she thinks. Then he called his assistant. Arrange a test project for her. Something difficult. I want to see if this little heiress can survive in my world. The teenager walked into the office that morning, her backpack over one shoulder. She was calm, almost too calm, as if she already knew what was coming. Jonathan greeted her with a wide, mocking smile. Good morning, heiress. Today, you'll handle a project that even my best managers struggle with. Don't embarrass yourself. The teenager tilted her head slightly, a faint smile on her lips. I accept the challenge, she said softly. There was something in her voice, quiet, steady, that made Jonathan pause for a second, but he quickly dismissed it and handed her a thick folder. Inside were complex reports, contracts, and financial statements. The project was clear. She had to find a way to increase the company's profits by 20% in 3 months. Everyone knew it was nearly impossible. Even Jonathan's top executives had failed at similar projects before. The teenager didn't complain. She walked to her small desk, opened her laptop, and started analyzing. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, making notes, connecting numbers, and reading carefully through every contract. It was like watching a master strategist at work, even though she looked like any ordinary teen. Meanwhile, employees watched her silently. Some whispered, "She's so young. How can she do this?" Others were quietly impressed. But the millionaire remained confident that she would fail. He leaned back, sipping his coffee, smiling as he imagined her embarrassment. Days passed. The teenager faced one obstacle after another. Jonathan deliberately assigned hidden complications, missing files, tricky clients, and employees who tried to mislead her. Yet every time she stayed calm. She adapted, solved problems, and found new ideas. One morning, an employee tried to trick her with false numbers. The teenager noticed immediately. She didn't raise her voice or get angry. Instead, she quietly corrected the mistake and continued her work, leaving the employee shocked. Who is she really?" he whispered. Jonathan started noticing small changes too. Reports improved. Profits slowly began rising in parts of the project. The teenager's strategies were clever, precise, and unexpectedly effective. The CEO's smirk began to fade. For the first time, he felt a hint of concern. By the end of the week, the teenager called Jonathan to his office. "I've analyzed everything," she said. "Here's a plan that can increase profits by 20% within 3 months." Jonathan took the papers and studied them. His eyes widened slightly. This was not ordinary thinking. This was brilliant. He cleared his throat, hiding his surprise. "Impressive," he said finally, forcing a smile. "But we'll see if it works in reality." The teenager nodded. Actions speak louder than words. "Let's see." As she left the office, employees whispered in amazement. The teenager, the one they had laughed at yesterday, was already showing signs of real power and skill. And in the shadows, Jonathan Montgomery felt the first uneasy thought of doubt. He might have underestimated her. The challenge had begun, but the real game was only starting. The black teenager who walked into the company with nothing but confidence was slowly changing the rules. And the millionaire was about to find out. This heiress was unlike anyone he had ever faced. Days passed, and the young black teenager was no longer just a new heiress in the office. She had become the topic of whispered conversations and curious glances. Employees watched her carefully, noting how she seemed calm, clever, and fearless, even in a place filled with power and wealth. But beneath her quiet confidence, a secret lingered, one that no one, not even Jonathan Montgomery, could have guessed. One afternoon, Jonathan called her to his office. His face was serious now, the arrogance from before replaced with a hint of concern. "You've done well with the project," he said, flipping through her reports. "But tell me, where'd you learn all this? You're just a teenager." The teenager paused. Her dark eyes met his, calm but intense. "I've learned from experience," she said softly. "From watching, listening, and knowing what's right." Jonathan leaned back, studying her. Something about her tone, her manner, seemed too mature, too certain. He wondered if she had a mentor or some secret training, but the girl gave nothing away. Later that evening, as she walked through the office corridors empty of people, a few employees whispered behind closed doors. "She's not just a teenager," one said. "I've seen her before, somewhere else maybe." In her small apartment, the teenager opened an old, hidden box. Inside were faded letters, a small key, and photographs of a grand mansion. She touched one picture carefully. It showed a young girl standing beside a woman and a man, both dressed elegantly, smiling proudly. Her eyes glimmered with memory and pain. Her story was hidden, even from the world. She was a secret child of a powerful family, kept away from the public eye for safety reasons. After her parents passed away under mysterious circumstances, the fortune and legacy of the family had been quietly transferred, but nobody knew the full truth. Until now, back in the office, Jonathan noticed subtle changes in the way employees responded to her. Some were respectful, some cautious, but all watched her with curiosity. Still, he refused to believe that a teenager could hold such power, even if her results were impressive. The next day, she faced a small challenge from one of the senior managers. He tried to test her knowledge of the company's hidden rules, but the teenager responded quickly, revealing insights that no one could have expected. Her words hinted at an understanding far beyond her age, an awareness of the company's history and hidden workings. Jonathan's confident facade cracked slightly. He asked himself, could she really know all this? Is she hiding something? Meanwhile, the teenager smiled privately. She knew the timing had to be perfect. Revealing her identity too soon could bring jealousy, sabotage, or danger. She needed to wait, plan, and prepare. For now, she let the world see only what she wanted them to see. An ordinary teenager with extraordinary skill. Employees continued to gossip. Rumors started to spread. Who is she really? Where did she come from? She must be related to someone important. No one knew the full truth, but everyone felt the tension. Something big was about to happen, and the teenager was at the center of it. Jonathan, pacing in his office late at night, could not shake the feeling of unease. For the first time in decades, he felt doubt. He had always been in control, always the smartest in the room. But this girl, she was different. Mysterious, fearless, and sharper than anyone expected. And as she prepared for the next challenge, the teenager smiled quietly to herself. She had a plan, and her secret identity was her greatest weapon. The millionaire had laughed at her once, but soon he would learn that underestimating her was the biggest mistake of his life. The office was quieter than usual that morning. Employees glanced at each other nervously, waiting to see what the teenager would do next. Word spread about her mysterious background and her incredible skills, but nobody truly expected what she was about to achieve. Jonathan Montgomery, the CEO, sat in his glass-walled office, staring at the reports she had submitted the night before. He had read them twice, then a third time. Slowly, a frown formed on his usually confident face. These plans, they weren't ordinary. They were clever, precise, and far beyond what he thought a teenager could manage. He called her into his office. "Explain this," he said, pointing to a detailed strategy she had created to improve the company's production and sales. "It's unusual, bold, even. Why would you do it this way?" The teenager smiled faintly, calm as ever. "Because it works," she said simply. "I've studied the numbers, the employees, the market. This is the most efficient way to get the results you want." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, trying to hide his surprise. He had expected mistakes, hesitation, even failure, but she spoke with confidence, clarity, and understanding, things he had rarely seen in adults, let alone a teenager. Over the next few days, the teenager began implementing her plan. Employees were skeptical at first. Some whispered, "This will never work," while others cautiously followed her instructions. But slowly, the results began to show. Production lines ran smoother. Delays disappeared. Costs dropped, and profits started to rise. Employees who had once laughed at her were now secretly impressed. One by one, they began to respect her ideas, even admiring her courage. Jonathan, however, remained silent. He watched from his office as the company began to transform under her guidance. Every success she achieved chipped away at his arrogance. The millionaire who had once laughed at her now felt a sting of doubt he couldn't ignore. Then came the day of the big presentation. Jonathan gathered the board of directors to review the progress of the company's latest project. The teenager walked into the conference room, carrying her laptop and notes. Heads turned. Some executives whispered nervously, while others watched in awe. She began her presentation. Her voice was steady, her words simple but powerful. She explained every step, every decision, and every prediction. The board members leaned forward, fascinated. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a moment before slow applause began. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He had to admit, even to himself, that she was brilliant, but he refused to let it show. "Well," he said finally, trying to mask his respect with a hint of sarcasm, "you've done okay." The teenager smiled politely. "I hope the results speak louder than words," she said. And indeed, the results did. By the end of the month, her strategies had increased profits beyond expectations. The employees who had doubted her now saw her as a leader, not just an heiress. That evening, as she walked through the office, she felt a quiet satisfaction. This was her first major victory, not just against challenges, but against the arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable. Jonathan, alone in his office, stared out at the city lights. He had always been the smartest person in the room. But this teenager, she had changed everything. For the first time in his career, he felt uncertain, cautious, and even a little afraid. And the teenager, unaware of his growing unease, smiled to herself. She knew this was only the beginning. Her first victory had been achieved, but the real journey, the one that would truly shake the foundations of the company, was just beginning. If you want, I can continue and write part 5, the betrayal, making it dramatic. The teenager's victory had sent shockwaves through Montgomery Enterprises. Employees who had doubted her now watched her with respect, even admiration. But in a company filled with ambition, greed, and power, admiration often turned into jealousy, and jealousy could be deadly. One quiet morning, the teenager arrived at her desk to find her carefully prepared project files missing. Panic did not show on her face, but inside, a sharp sense of betrayal pricked her mind. Someone had tried to sabotage her work. Whispers spread across the office. "Did you see what happened to her?" One employee murmured. "I heard the files vanished overnight." Another added, "It must be one of the managers. They can't stand her." The teenager did not panic. She pulled out her laptop, retraced her steps, and began reviewing every backup. Hours of careful planning. Every strategy she had worked on. Had someone stolen her hard work and tried to claim it as their own? Jonathan Montgomery noticed a sudden tension in the office. He had been monitoring her progress quietly, impressed by her first victory. But now he sensed something was wrong. He stepped into main hall, frowning. "What happened here?" he demanded. The teenager looked up calmly. "Someone tried to sabotage my project," she said. "They deleted files, misled employees, and tried to make me fail." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Who would do this?" he asked. He expected her to panic or falter, but she remained unshaken, confident, and determined. Throughout the day, she quietly investigated. She noticed small clues, a misplaced email, a suspicious login, a hurried glance from one of the senior managers. Piece by piece, the web of betrayal began to unravel. Finally, she confronted the culprit, a senior manager who had openly mocked her from day one. He stammered, trying to deny everything, but she had evidence, clear and undeniable. The employees watched in silence, some shocked, some cheering quietly for her courage. "I trusted you to work with me, not against me," she said calmly, her voice cold but steady. "You underestimated me, and you thought I was weak. You were wrong." The manager's face turned pale. Jonathan, standing behind her, felt a mix of surprise and approval. The teenager had handled the betrayal without drama, without panic, and with perfect control. But the betrayal left a mark. She realized that not everyone would accept her leadership willingly. Some would try to bring her down, and she had to be ready. This was more than just business. It was a battle for respect, power, and survival. That evening, as she walked through the empty office, she reflected on the day. The betrayal had been a test, a harsh reminder that even allies could be enemies and appearances could be deceiving. But she had passed. Not only had she reclaimed her project, but she had also exposed the dishonesty within the company, showing everyone that she was not someone to be underestimated. Jonathan Montgomery, sitting alone in his office, couldn't help but admire her. She had faced deception, sabotage, and doubt, and yet she had emerged stronger. For the first time, he began to truly respect her, even if he would never admit it openly. The teenager knew this was only the beginning. Betrayal was inevitable in a world of ambition and wealth. But she also knew that every challenge made her stronger, smarter, and more unstoppable. And as she prepared for the next move, she smiled quietly. The game was no longer just about profit or projects. It had become a battle of wits, courage, and willpower. And she was ready for anything that came next. The atmosphere in Montgomery Enterprises was tense that morning. News of the teenager's first victory and her handling of betrayal had spread like wildfire. Employees whispered in corners, stealing glances at her as she passed, both in awe and fear of her growing influence. But one person felt the tension most: Jonathan Montgomery, the Millionaire CEO. He sat in his massive office, staring at the skyline through the glass walls. For the first time in decades, he felt uneasy. The young black teenager, whom he had laughed at when she first arrived, was no longer just a new heiress or a promising teen. She had proven herself clever, bold, and unshakable. And now, she was threatening his authority in ways he hadn't expected. Jonathan called her to his office. "Come in," he said, forcing a calm tone, though his eyes betrayed a hint of frustration. The teenager entered confidently. She did not hesitate, did not falter. Her calm gaze met his, and for a moment, the room seemed charged with unspoken tension. "I want answers," Jonathan began, his voice firm but controlled. "How are you turning this company around so quickly? How do you know so much about operations, employees, and even my strategies?" The teenager smiled faintly. "I observe, I learn, and I think," she said simply. "And I know that a company is not built on fear or arrogance. It is built on ideas, respect, and results." Jonathan's jaw tightened. He had expected excuses, hesitation, or nervousness. Instead, she spoke with confidence and clarity that challenged his entire authority. "I've been running this company for 20 years, he said, his tone sharp now. "I know what works, and I know what doesn't. You are a teenager. You are inexperienced." She stepped closer, her eyes unwavering. "Experience is not just about years, Mr. Montgomery," she said softly. "It's about understanding, decision-making, and courage. I may be young, but I see clearly what you refuse to see." For the first time, Jonathan felt the weight of reality. The teenager had not only succeeded where his managers had failed, but she had also exposed weaknesses he had ignored. His employees were starting to respect her more than him, and his confidence was shaken. The board meeting that afternoon was the true test. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, prepared to assert his control. The teenager presented her next plan, a bold, strategic initiative that could revolutionize the company's profits. She spoke with poise, answering every question with precision. Some board members leaned forward in surprise. Others whispered excitedly. And Jonathan, he struggled to maintain his composure. Every word she spoke was a reminder that she was not just a teen, but a force to be reckoned with. Finally, Jonathan leaned back and spoke, his tone measured. "You've done well, but don't forget you are still young. Mistakes can be costly." The teenager's smile was calm, almost gentle. "Mistakes are lessons, Mr. Montgomery, and lessons make us stronger. I don't intend to make the same mistake twice." The board exchanged glances, impressed by her confidence and intelligence. Jonathan realized the truth he had been avoiding. She was no ordinary teenager. She was the rightful heiress, a natural leader, and perhaps the smartest person in the room. As she left the boardroom, employees watched in awe. Jonathan remained behind, staring at the city below. For the first time, he admitted silently to himself he might have underestimated her, and that underestimation could cost him more than he ever imagined. Outside, the teenager walked with quiet determination. The showdown had ended, but the war for control, respect, and dominance was far from over. She had proved herself to the millionaire, gained the loyalty of employees, and exposed the weaknesses of the man who had once laughed at her. And as the sun set over the city, a silent truth hung in the air. The teenager was no longer just a new heiress. She was a force that could change everything. And the millionaire had just realized that his kingdom was no longer entirely his. The company was buzzing with curiosity and tension. Employees had seen her rise from an ordinary-looking teenager to someone whose skills and intelligence could not be ignored. But no one knew the full truth. Not even Jonathan Montgomery, the CEO who had once laughed at her. That morning, the teenager walked into the office carrying a small, elegant folder. Inside were documents that revealed her true identity, the key to everything she had achieved. Her parents had been the hidden founders of a branch of Montgomery Enterprises, and their fortune had been kept secret for safety. She was not just a new heiress. She was a rightful heir, the person who had been destined to lead the company. Jonathan was summoned to a private meeting. He thought it was just another strategy discussion, but as she handed him the folder, his eyes widened. He flipped through the papers slowly, the color draining from his face. This can't be real," he muttered. The teenager's voice was calm, steady, and full of authority. "It is real. Everything I've done, the strategies, the solutions, the victories, they were not only to prove myself, but to show that I am ready to take what is mine. I am the true heiress of this company." Jonathan felt a strange mix of shock, disbelief, and respect. He had underestimated her at every step, thinking her youth and appearance meant weakness. But now he saw the truth. She was fearless, brilliant, and destined to lead. Employees who had gathered outside the office sensed a change. Whispers ran through the hallways. "Did you hear? She's a real heir." "The teenager? The one who won against the CEO." Murmurs of astonishment and admiration spread like wildfire. Jonathan straightened, tried to regain his composure. "So, all this time you've been planning this?" he asked, a mixture of awe and challenge in his voice. The teenager nodded. "Yes, and I've done it not out of revenge or pride, but because I want to lead this company the right way, with honesty, intelligence, and fairness. I want to honor my family's legacy." For the first time, Jonathan smiled, not the smug, arrogant smile he once wore, but a real, respectful one. "You've proven yourself beyond doubt. You have not only earned your place, but have shown the courage and skill to command respect. I was wrong to laugh at you." The teenager extended her hand calmly. "Thank you. But it is time for the company to move forward, not for me, but for everyone who works here." The board of directors, who had been secretly watching, applauded quietly. Employees gathered in the halls, cheering, whispering, and smiling at the teenager who had overcome every obstacle, mockery, sabotage, doubt, and emerged victorious. She had transformed the company, challenged the most powerful man in the room, and revealed a secret that no one expected. Jonathan watched her, a mix of pride and humility in his eyes. He realized that leadership was more than wealth, power, or years of experience. It was courage, vision, and integrity. And this teenager had all of it. The teenager stood at the large glass windows, looking out over the city. Her journey had been hard, filled with doubt, betrayal, and challenges. But she had risen above them all. The millionaire who had once laughed at her was now her ally, her respect earned through the trial of her abilities. As the sun set, casting golden light across the office, the teenager smiled quietly. She had claimed her place, proved her worth, and shown the world that strength and brilliance come in all forms, even in a young black teenager. And so, the story ended not with arrogance or fear, but with triumph, respect, and the beginning of a new era at Montgomery Enterprises, a testament of courage, intelligence, and the unstoppable power of someone who refused to be underestimated.